I've seen a lot of shade being thrown at the Better Balanced Game mod for how much it buffs various elements of the game. Magnus giving extra production on internal trade routes, Pen, Brush, and Voice giving twice as much culture compared to vanilla, fishing boats granting +1 production from the start of the game, etc. It's no wonder that multiplayer players set faster paces than the single-player content creators. The Better Balanced Game mod they play with isn't balanced at all. However, what this analysis misses is how much has been nerfed by BBG, and nobody's been hit harder than the religious civs. Let's take Ethiopia for instance. They get less faith from resources, less faith on their unique tile improvement, no longer gain extra combat strength on hills for all units, and their extra science and culture from faith has been cut from 15% to just 10%. To add insult to injury, BBG also nerfs the Monumentality Golden Age dedication substantially, and nerfs the strongest religious beliefs like work ethic, and strong pantheons like River Goddess. So, how does a civ like Ethiopia fare in multiplayer Civ 6 after all of these nerfs? It actually does just fine. No commercial hub rush, no Magnus internals, just a full holy site opener with the nerfed Monumentality. So, what gives? Well, as it turns out, religious civs are just completely overtuned in the base game. If I wanted to, I could turn off BBG and churn out science victories on civs like Khmer and Russia, faster than would be possible on any civ with the mod active. In today's video, however, we'll just be concerning ourselves with how to play out the early game with BBG when playing as a religious civ. Before we begin, it should be noted that there are really two categories of religious civs: the holy site spammers, who build a holy site as their first district in every city, and the minimal holy site investors, who only build 2 to 3 holy sites early to found their religion and then pivot back into commercial hubs/harbors afterwards. You see, some religious civs have their bonuses tied directly to holy sites, whereas others only have their bonuses tied to their religion. For instance, a civ like Khmer wants to put a holy site in every city to build their unique temple and gain the benefit of their holy site adjacency bonuses, where a civ like Georgia only needs to build a handful of holy sites to found their religion at the start of the game, and prefers to invest into primarily building commercial hubs or harbors afterwards. These two types of civs still have a lot in common. They all found religions, generate a ton of faith, and want to pick Monumentality as their first Golden Age dedication. In this video, we'll go over how both of these types of civs play the early game. In Multiplayer 101, we went over how every early game strategy in free-for-all multiplayer Civ 6 requires 3 things to be successful: food, production, and culture. While non-religious heathens can mostly play the same way every game, simply relying on internal trade routes for food and production and the Pen, Brush, and Voice Golden Age dedication for culture, religious civs all play the opening a little bit differently from one another, so there's a bit more brainpower required. Basically, for each of the 3 yields, there are a number of ways of going about obtaining them. For food, all civs should consider the option of constructing the audience chamber building in their government plaza, which grants +3 food, +3 housing, and +1 amenity to all cities with a governor assigned. However, the holy site spammers also have the option of choosing Feed the World, which grants food and housing on all shrines and temples. Furthermore, the minimal holy site investors have the option of relying on trade routes boosted by the Governor Magnus. We always want to make sure that we have at least one of these 3 options incorporated into our early build order. As for production, the important thing to note is that we don't actually need as much literal production in the early game as a non-religious civ would. This is because we have access to Monumentality, which allows us to faith purchase civilian units, effectively supplementing faith for production. However, more production is still always a good thing. For holy site spammers, we can go for the work ethic belief, which in BBG has been reworked to grant extra production on shrines and temples. For the minimal holy site investors, Jesuit education is a strong option which will grant the ability to faith purchase buildings and campuses and theater squares for the rest of the game. Lastly, internal trade routes still help out here if they're an option. Culture is the final ingredient for a successful early game build order, and we actually have to work at it this time. There's no pen, brush, and voice granting 2 culture per district to bail us out here. We went for monumentality as our Golden Age dedication, after all. In this case, we always want to spend at least 2 of our first 3 governor titles on Moksha, who in BBG has a promotion that grants +1 culture per citizen in the city he's assigned to. The extra 2 faith per district he provides, as well as the 100% extra passive religious pressure his city exerts, are also welcome bonuses. In addition to Moksha, Holy Site spammers also have the option of going for the choral music belief, which grants extra culture on all shrines and temples. If that's not an option, either because it was taken by another civ or because we're playing a minimal Holy Site investor, building some extra monuments is going to be our best bet for generating good culture. Okay, so these are the pieces of a good religious build order. It should go without saying that we do not need all of these. After all, several of the religious beliefs listed here are mutually exclusive with one another. What we do need, however, is monumentality and moksha, so we'll put a little star next to them. In addition to these, we want at least 1 option from the food category, and at least 1 additional option from both the production and culture categories. If we follow this guideline, we'll have a good build order that can scale well. Congratulations on surviving 6 minutes of theory on this accursed blue background. As a reward, we'll now examine 2 different games played as 2 very different civs, and see how both of them adhere to these principles. First up, an Ethiopia game. As this civ gains extra science and culture equal to a percentage of the faith it generates, it's a clear candidate for a Holy Site spam build order. To start the game, we go for astrology right away. This is because, as you may recall from the Multiplayer 101 video, districts become more expensive the more technologies and civics we have completed. Unlocking Holy Sites with just 1 technology completed will give us the cheapest possible districts. In this game, we start out by producing 2 scouts. This is necessary in order to reliably generate enough era score to secure our first Golden Age, as meeting players, discovering natural wonders, and finding tribal villages all grants era score. Afterwards, we go for a settler, followed by our first Holy Site. Once this Holy Site is completed, we go for another settler, and then return to build a shrine in our capital afterwards. Combined with starting a Holy Site in our second city right away, this build order ensures that we'll passively earn our first Great Profit before the end of the Ancient Era, which makes hitting our first Golden Age much easier. Afterwards, we go for a monument, as extra culture from an early monument is helpful for getting our hands on our governor titles sooner. Our pantheon in this game is River Goddess. It's a bit nerfed compared to the base game, but it's still good on civs that like to put a Holy Site in every city. Every city we build in this game is going to start with a Holy Site as its first district. Afterwards, they'll produce either a shrine or a builder. Really, it's just a question of how worthwhile the tile improvements we can make are. If there aren't any important ones, we'll just make the shrine right away instead. The reason we're prioritizing shrines so highly is because our plan is to take one of the religious beliefs that buffs them. Just as planned, we invest 2 of our early governor titles into securing and promoting Moksha in order to bolster our early culture. As always with all build orders, we want to put down our government plaza immediately, as it instantly grants a governor title upon being completed. The time finally comes to choose our religion. As Ethiopia, we'd like to get our hands on one of the 3 shrine beliefs. Choosing any one of these will satisfy one of the 3 main yields we're looking to get in the early game. In this case, the choice is made for us, as other players have already taken the Feed the World and choral music beliefs, forcing us into work ethic. This means that we'll have plenty of production in this game, so now we just need to focus on getting our hands on some food and culture. Our second belief is just pilgrimage, for an extra 2 faith per turn for every city following our religion. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. We choose our first Golden Age dedication, Monumentality. This dedication has been nerfed a bit by BBG. It still allows us to faith purchase civilian units, but now we only get a 10% discount on purchasing them instead of a 30% discount. Even still, it's a fantastic dedication, and it opens up some interesting plays that aren't even possible for non-religious civs. One such play is rushing out a powerful early game wonder. By taking autocracy as our first government and slotting in the Core V policy card, we gain 25% extra production towards all wonders. These bonuses apply on chops, so faith buying some builders lets us quickly chop out whatever wonder we want. In this case, Hanging Gardens. Afterwards, we switch out of autocracy and into the generally superior classical republic government, and then we go for the audience chamber to get another governor title and some extra food in all of our cities with governors. Grabbing a wonder like we just did is always a good strategy to go for when we play a holy site spam civ like Ethiopia, as doing so grants the inspiration for drama and poetry. This makes it very convenient to dip down and grab the theology civic, which gives us the ability to make temples. All of those extra envoys we get from teching mysticism and theology early can be assigned to religious city-states to gain more yields on our shrines and temples. Remember, our religious belief is work ethic, so we gain +4 production in every city with a temple. As a result, it's good to build these right away in every city. This detour for theology isn't without its drawbacks. If you'll recall from the Multiplayer 101 video, the Feudalism Civic is an absolutely critical power spike that we want to reach as quickly as possible. Grabbing theology first delays this. Secondly, grabbing mysticism, drama and poetry, and theology also increases our overall civics completion percentage, which is going to make building new districts more expensive in the short term. Because of this, we only ever go for theology prior to feudalism if we're running a belief that buffs temples. Otherwise, we'd be better off rushing feudalism first. Speaking of rushing feudalism, we need to make sure our culture is up to the task. In addition to choosing the Governor Moksha for the extra culture he grants, our Ethiopian Civ bonuses are granting us 10% of our faith per turn as culture, meaning that on turn 40 in this game, we're already getting roughly 10 culture per turn from this bonus. As a result, our culture is respectable enough to reach feudalism on a good pace. In the turns leading up to completing feudalism, we save up all of our faith. Once we finally unlock it, we slot in the serfdom policy card and go ham, buying a 5-charge builder in every single city in our empire. The next turn, we buy even more. We're planning to completely deforest every hill tile in our empire, and build mines on all of them. This is what causes our stats to grow so explosively, as all of these chops slingshot us out of the early game and into the mid game. Ideally, we want to buy enough builders before the end of Monumentality to give every city enough tile improvements to work for the foreseeable future, so that we can avoid having to choose Monumentality again in the medieval era. If we've played correctly, we'll already have faith bought enough civilian units to last for the rest of the mid-game. Consequently, our second Golden Age dedication is generally going to be a toss-up between Pen, Brush, and Voice or Free Inquiry. The decision generally comes down to how much science Free Inquiry would grant us based on our commercial hub and harbor adjacencies. In this game, we built no harbors and only a handful of commercial hubs, which total to an adjacency of 11. This is not sufficient to justify Free Inquiry, so we go for Pen, Brush, and Voice instead. And that just about wraps up the Ethiopian early game. In summary, our game plan started with putting a holy site as the first district in every city. Then, to meet our early game needs, we built the audience chamber for food, utilized monumentality and work ethic for production, and used a combination of the Governor Moksha plus our Ethiopian Civ bonuses for culture. We were able to reach feudalism at a respectable turn 46, and then faith bought a ton of 5-charge builders everywhere to accelerate our game. As we can see, our empire eventually blossomed into a beautiful position where we can take our pick of victory conditions to pursue. However, as stated before, not every religious civ wants to spam holy sites everywhere. So, now we'll take a look at a game played as Poland, in order to see how we still manage to achieve all of the staples of a good early game build order with a wildly different set of choices. The start is the same. We rush astrology, and our capital goes Scout, Scout, Settler, Holy Site. Our pantheon, however, is a bit different. We don't want River Goddess like we had in the last game, as we're only planning to build a handful of holy sites. In this case, we go for Earth Goddess to give us some extra faith, since our land in this game has pretty good appeal. Our build order already starts to get kind of weird, however. After finishing our holy site, we immediately run 2 projects in order to generate some bursts of great profit points, before returning to build our 3rd settler. This is because, once we found our religion, we instantly gain a free relic from our leader bonus, and we also gain extra yields on all relics. Furthermore, as Poland, we always want to choose the Reliquaries belief, which triples the faith yield of relics. All in all, we end up earning 4 gold, 2 culture, and 18 faith per turn from our relic, making Poland the only civ in the game that can justify running 2 holy site projects this early, even when our religion isn't actually being contested. Okay, fast forward a bit and we put Moksha in our capital and we take the Monumentality Golden Age dedication. One thing we do differently, however, is that we spend an early governor title on Magnus here. This is done largely to gain access to his 50% extra yields on chops, which we plan to put to use in our 2nd city in order to secure the pyramids. Just like last game, we enter into autocracy with Corvi as our first government, chop out a wonder, and then switch to Classical Republic and build the audience chamber. So far, so good. Unlike last game, however, we aren't going to be making a detour for theology, rushing straight for feudalism instead. Furthermore, our cities aren't all building a holy site as their first district. Instead, they're all building commercial hubs, followed by markets for some extra trade route capacity. We use these trade routes to jumpstart new cities with some extra food and production by sending them internally. Notice how, thanks to our civ bonuses, we're still earning 92 faith per turn on turn 44, even with just 2 holy sites completed and no temples. In order to generate good culture in this game, we just rely on Moksha's promotion as well as having a monument built in all of our first 3 cities. Furthermore, we're also getting an extra 2 culture per turn from our free relic, thanks to our leader bonus. It's not as much culture as we had in the previous game, but it doesn't have to be. After all, in this game, we didn't make a detour to grab the Theology Civic. As a result, we once again hit feudalism on turn 46. Of course, we then slot in the Serfdom Policy card and faith buy a bunch of builders in all of our cities. As per usual, these builders deforest all of our hills, replacing them with mines, and we start building out all of our infrastructure as is typical in the mid-game. However, our spawn is incredibly cramped in terms of space, and the land is of fairly low quality, so we're pretty much doomed to fall behind if we just focus on peaceful development. To make matters worse, none of our neighbors seem willing to form an alliance with us. Naturally, we gear up for a war with our unique unit, the Winged Hussar. We evangelize our religion to have the Crusades belief, pre-build and upgrade a ton of these units, and luck out with World Congress giving us +5 combat strength on all heavy cavalry units. Then, we violently claw our way back to relevancy by killing that arrogant Korea, who thought he was too good to renew his declaration of friendship with us. Even though we had a relatively lackluster spawn compared to the previous game, we still managed to build a massive, relevant war machine that we can attempt to lead to a 2nd place finish for those juicy CPL ELO points. So, in summary, our game plan consisted of building just 2 holy sites before spamming commercial hubs in every city. To achieve the necessary early game yields, we constructed the audience chamber and used internal trade routes for food. We utilized the monumentality and internal trade routes for production, and we grabbed Moksha plus some monuments for culture. We still managed to achieve a respectable turn 46 feudalism timing, used monumentality to faith buy a wave of builders in the mid-game, and ended up in a decent spot to play for 2nd in the end. Hopefully, this video has helped to key you in on the various ways that the early game in BBG can be approached when playing religious civs. This video actually serves as a soft remake of the third video I ever posted on this channel, as it doesn't really hold up to the modern standards of video production my newer videos achieve. In the near future, I may be remaking the very first video on this channel, going over in more detail the build order for commercial hub/harbor civs centered around the Governor Magnus. However, word on the street is that the Better Balanced Game developers are planning to nerf Magnus in the near future, so we'll have to wait and see what form that nerf will take before I return to cover the internal trade route opening. That's all for now. Herson signing out.